Blog Talk Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the longest running Bigfoot podcast on Blog Talk Radio. The original Squatchdetective Radio, featuring your hosts, Steve Coles and Chris Bennett. 3 decades of Bigfoot research, 2 decades of Bigfoot radio. Here we go.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
And then this thing walks across the road, takes a turn towards us, and then leaps over a guardrail. All I can remember is flipping the light on, and I see this creature, and I knew in my heart, I knew in my mind, in the whole night, this isn't a man.
And the whole time, the whole thing was shadowing us, right behind us, right on the side of us. You could kind of see the thing moving through the woods.
There are thousands of perfect people whose word would be good on any other subject, who describe getting a good look at an enormous hair-covered upright animal. And that is a fact.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatchdetective Radio for today's date, March 4th, 2018. I am your host, your guide, the Squatch Detective Steve Coles, along with, well, this man is never a loss for words, the never constipated Chris Bennett. What's up, Chris?
Steve, man, it's good to hear your voice, and it's good to be back.
Amen to that. It's been a couple, almost 2 years since we've had we were on the edge of reality radio network, right. And it's actually been 4 years, almost 4 years since we've been on Blog Talk. So here we are back again.
Yeah, Blog Talk. It's been a really long time, man. But I couldn't hardly remember my login to get back in here, but it came back to me though.
Yeah, it's like riding a horse. You never, ever forget. And what a show we have tonight. We have on the great Sean Forker, never at a loss for words.
Not on purpose.
He's lurking back there. And we have some interesting stuff to talk about tonight. I mean, it's been a couple of years since we've been on this crazy show. And I'm just so glad that we, I got to throw it out to Shadow. You see Shadow and, of course, our good friend Digger Dog. And welcome, guys. And, we are competing against a couple of things tonight. The Walking Dead, of course. And which I'm DVRing, so I'm not worried about that. And, of course, we're dealing with the Academy Awards tonight. So, I don't think, for some reason, Anatomy of a Bigfoot Hoax is going to make the Academy Awards tonight. But
probably not.
I'm sorry. I just had to throw that out there just because. Anyway. So tonight's, and Sean, why don't you come on in and say hello?
Hi, Steve. Hi, Chris. It's hello, listeners. This is fun. I'm already enjoying myself.
So we got a few things up on the board. Of course, earlier in the pre run up, we were talking about a guy known as the Squatch Master has made his return using a different YouTube name, obviously. And I found that quite interesting, and I'm just trying to see what name he's using because I forgot already. That's how important it is to me. But, oops, wrong one. But anyway,
isn't he the one that had the video of what he said your claim was Bigfoot shaking the tree, and then there was another YouTuber that was in the area that went out there the next day, and it was like boot tracks all around the tree.
Was that the Squatch Master or was that Timber Giant?
No, I thought that was Squatch Master too.
Actually, I think it was Squatch Master. Well, now he's using the name Squatch Dog, and of course, but if anybody remembers, he had come out with this audio, supposedly of Sasquatch talk. And somebody said it sounded like reverse English, so I reversed it. And sure enough, what it was a conversation. It sounded like on a radio between some folks saying, "Oh, I hit my head. Are you okay?" And all it was reversed. And right. Well, anyway, he came out with a video in January of this year that, as he's walking around, he has, of course, this ubiquitous thing walking in the background at the end of the video, which looks like somebody in a costume to me. But he's walking around and he's looking on the ground and he sees these big ring of rocks. And, oh my God, it's Sasquatch Stonehenge going on here. No, they're fire pits. They're fire pits. So,
well, the charcoal, the charcoal sticks of wood should have given a pretty indication that what somebody was doing with that ring of rocks.
Yep. So I don't know. So anyway, I want to start off with this week's grand discussion, and just want to take it a little bit, and then we're going to pass it over to Sean so we can talk about some of the stuff he's been doing. But I wanted to start off by talking about, for many of you who know, there's a Bigfoot lawsuit out there against the state of California. And I want to get your guys' take on it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now put you all on the spot.
Well, I read through that a little bit myself, Steve, and I think it's just she's hoping beyond hope. I don't think it's going to happen. That'd be kind of difficult before she can get them to recognize that the Sasquatch is a living creature. I think she'd have to provide some evidence of that. And the court's just not going to hear it. I'm surprised the court would hear it. I mean, she's filed the case, but and no disrespect towards her or anything. I mean, I respect the effort, but I just don't see a good outcome for it.
I don't know, Mr. Forker. What's your take on it?
Well, in 15 days, I guess we'll find out, right? It goes to trial on the 19th, or it gets heard on the 19th.
Yeah, there is a hearing on the 19th, and I actually caught a little bit of a interview with Miss Claudia Ackley. And Claudia, if you're listening out there, hello. I know she is on my friends list on Facebook.
Mine too.
Yeah.
And I know that she now has a pro bono attorney.
No.
And it's a rather large law firm. So there actually may be some movement forward on this. We'll have to see.
I guess if she doesn't say anything between now and then and kind of keeps her public appearances to a minimum and doesn't say anything, for the love of God, stupid, she'll be all right. But the moment she says something nebulous and out of this world, case dismissed. It's over.
Well, I have heard her. I did listen to her interview on Jeffrey Gonzalez's podcast. She did it at maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago or so.
Is that Paranormal Central?
Yeah, something or other, I believe so. But anyway, she was on the show there, and that's where she announced that she does have a law firm. She didn't mention the attorney's name. And she did not say anything really out of the ordinary, just that she had seen it. There is no woo factor or anything like that involved with it, which is good. Right. And I agree with you, Chris. I applaud the effort. Now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, she's trying to get attention for herself." I don't think so.
It's kind of, it really is. Think about it, Steve. If she goes ahead and gets this, and it goes through, and it gets recognized, that's a big step forward.
Absolutely. So I applaud. I too applaud the effort. I think we should embrace it. I mean, what the hell? The only thing that I don't like is that, one of our consultants is Todd Standing. And if you want to disprove your case, just have Todd bring some of his photos into the court, and that'll be the end of that. Allegedly, allegedly, what she stated is that, he's a nice man, and true, what can I say? I've always said he's knowledgeable about the topic, not necessarily sure about all his material, but he is knowledgeable about the topic. But she did say she was going to try to she was going to bring Bob Gimlin. According to her, Bob Gimlin has agreed to testify on the behalf and pro. And, the introduction to this says, and this is something that apparently Claudia had worked with Mr. Standing, which please don't bring Puppet Face into the court. Please. Or Blinky, because Blinky's been disproven. Then they can use my own stuff against that whole argument there. So, but it starts off by saying, for over 100 years, thousands of men and women across the state of California claim to have witnessed a bipedal hominoid creature that received its common name Bigfoot 60 years ago in a 1958 article in a California newspaper, Humboldt Times. At the time, the article was considered to be groundbreaking and was published across the United States as well as internationally, triggering a groundswell of interest in the topic. Indeed, the species was even alluded to by President Theodore Roosevelt in his book, The Wilderness Hunter, published in 1892. Since then, PhDs, wildlife biologists, police forensic officers, and wilderness experts have been gathering physical evidence, film evidence, and eyewitness testimony from doctors, judges, engineers substantiating the existence of this species. And then, in spite of these overwhelming facts, respondents have refused to acknowledge the existence of this indigenous wildlife species and therefore derelict in their duty, which by their own mission statement is defined by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as follows. The mission of the Department of Fish and Wildlife is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for their ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public. In this petition, the petitioner leads a team of men and women who have dedicated their lives to the discovery and development of information regarding the Sasquatch, so on and so forth. So that is the beginning of that.
Well, see, there's a few problems, though, Steve. Like it's a great effort, and I applaud it. But when you get something that goes into a court of law, I mean, they go by evidence, and even though we do have people who have seen these creatures, that's going to be discounted. They want physical evidence, and that's the problem with it. I mean, if somebody was to go ahead and bring up a petition for the state of California to recognize unicorns in the forest, it would be about the same thing because there's no evidence to support that. And even though we have, hundreds or even thousands of eyewitness testimony that they have seen the Bigfoot, there's no physical evidence that will support it. So the judge can't consider it an actual living creature without that evidence.
Yes, but you see, this is where it gets interesting, and this is something the listeners really need to hone in on. And let me just put the caveat out there. Let me put the caveat out there that this isn't science. This is a court of law. And so we're not looking at physical evidence is just one part of the puzzle. The biggest thing that criminal courts, especially, and civil courts, go upon is what they call direct evidence. And direct evidence is witness testimony. So that does kind of level the playing field. She's not trying to prove this scientifically. She's trying to prove this. And since this is a civil suit, it doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. It just has to be on a preponderance of the evidence. So that does kind of shift the paradigm a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Well, like I said, you do have the eyewitness testimony, which the witnesses could give testimony in court, but I just don't see it happening, man. I really don't.
Well, it's a long shot. No, but I will not. I will not doubt that. But it's up to the jury of 12.
Right.
Now, this isn't. It's not necessarily going to be just one judge. It's going to be, and if he allows direct eyewitness testimony, which he has to because it's direct evidence. And if it goes all you have.
If it's heard before jury, everybody's come from California. There might be a good chance that somebody on the jury has seen one.
Yeah.
You never know.
And guess what? In a civil case, you only need to convince 7 of those jurors, not 12.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is definitely a. It doesn't. In a criminal trial, it has to be beyond all reasonable doubt, and you have to have a unanimous decision by the jury. Otherwise, you get a hung jury. In a civil trial, It's preponderance of the evidence, and all you need to do is get 7 of the 12. So I think, I think it's going to be very interesting. And like I said, and Digger brings out a good point, it's going to educate the public. Because now this is being in the public eye, you have a lot more people testifying on this. Hey, voila, now we have, the public getting educated, maybe hearing some things they've never heard before. So we shall see.
Just as long as we can keep the crazies away. So tired of the crazy.
Yes, that's right. So on and so forth. Forth. I respect. I look at it this way. They're entitled to their opinions and beliefs of what Sasquatch may be. However, to me, it always. I try not to bring science fiction into science, and it was John Green who. As you heard, the new introduction to the radio show was the final words of that intro was by John Green. And that was kind of my homage, that introduction actually, was because 3 out of the 4 people that spoke on there about their sighting reports have passed away. Well, the first one was Dan Gordon from the Whitehall Police. He passed away in early 2016. And the third one down was my good friend John, who actually brought me up to a research area many, many years ago in 2000. First time I had ever met him, and our friendship developed over the years. And finally, the last one was John Green. And those 3 have passed away. The second one was another good friend, Brian Goslin, who was a police officer in Whitehall, who had his. And those are all clips from prior Squatchdetective Radio episodes. So I thought it was kind of fun to put that together. But like John Green says, one of his best quotes I've ever heard is, I find it really difficult to try to solve a mystery with another mystery.
Yeah.
So, there's no evidence there's very little evidence to support what it is now, let alone it goes through wormholes or they teleported in because their planet was being destroyed or.
Why do you have to complicate it?
Exactly. Well, again, I think it's just man's inability. You go after it for so long and you can't get it, so it's got to be something that you can never get.
You're right. People can have an opinion, Steve, but they can still be idiots, and it doesn't change. Like there's just a reasonable expectation of what's humanly possible or physically possible, and some of this stuff is just stupid. It doesn't happen.
No, Shadow. You cannot channel him in your living room.
Maybe you can. I don't know. Maybe tomorrow I'll have that opinion, and if I have that opinion, it could be possible. I guess.
And then we'll be calling you. No.
Well, Shadow, it's a funny thing that you mentioned that because years ago. Go on. What?
Look in the chat room. What Shadow just wrote. Teacher says it ain't so. We haven't done that in a long time. There was.
Years ago, there was a show on Blog Talk or one of the other networks. I can't remember, but we're talking several years ago. And this lady was on there, and she said that she could channel Bigfoot. And they were asked a question, well, how do you do that? Well, evidently she would go out into the woods and just start walking around, and then the Bigfoot would tell her in her mind where to go and what to do. And I was on the chat room. I was having a ball with this. I was typing in so you're being controlled like like you would control a little toy truck, a RC truck. But
well, right now I'm sending her messages
actually,
and telling her where to go, Chris. That's
she believed that. I mean, she really believed that she was being controlled by Bigfoot. Okay. And no offense. I mean, if that's what she believes, that's fine. But really, I don't want her on my side.
Well, I remember years ago. In fact, it was down in Alabama. This woman was brought in that said she could call them in, just by channeling. And she was an RN. And so she got out there, and we let her do her thing. And after about an hour, we're like, okay, nothing happened. Let's go back to work. So
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the way it generally goes. It's for a lot of people, there's a lot of talk until it's actually time to do it, and then it never happens. Of course, what do you think the explanation is, Sean? Well, there's just too many negative people around. They sense negativity, so they don't show up. Or there's always some sort of excuse where the non-believers are the ones causing this not to happen.
I just can't do it. Like, it's just there's something wrong with you. Please see a psychiatrist. There's nothing wrong with getting help for these problems, and I think we should educate more on that. This is a time where science is really looking at this seriously, or we could get science to look at it seriously, and the next thing you know, the mind-talking Bigfoot channelers are going to go and ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's will the jury please stand up and all turn to the north? I don't know.
Let's direct it all in one area this time. See if we can make a dent in it.
Yep.
Anyway, I only have to go by what I know, in which I don't know much, and I don't think anybody knows much about these creatures. But
I agree with.
I can go by what a few. I've been lucky enough to have a few encounters, and I've made a few observations. And from what observations I have made, none of that stuff happened. They didn't mysteriously disappear into a wormhole. They weren't invisible, although they were camouflaged very well. But they weren't invisible. Things like that. I just don't understand how if they do it, I've never seen one do it, which I don't get the chance to view one every day. I wish I could. But, a lot of these outlandish claims are like, pretty much not acceptable for me anyway.
Well, it goes to say without standing that, an incredible claim requires, incredible proof.
Right.
And for all it ever takes, it always seems that there's never enough evidence. There is always an excuse not to have it. Well, they get really offended when their picture's taken, or they can see the infrared in a trail cam. Well, if people know trail cams, they don't project infrared. They have a photoelectric eye that and that doesn't produce that does not emit any sort of light source. So I just don't get it.
Well, Steve, it's like the claims of the people with habituation situations. They have these ongoing experiences and these gifts, and they have nothing to show for it but like 4 or 5 books they've written that tell you all about it, but still can't show you any evidence or get you any photographs or any proof. Or, bring people out to their homes that aren't direct family members that you can't produce anything.
Right. Well, exactly.
And they get offended when you ask, where's this evidence? Like, that's not meant to be offensive. It's meant to ask you, why am I wasting my time? Why can't you show me what you're saying time after time? Like, it gets old after a while. And Steve, we've been doing this for how long, guys? A long time. It hasn't changed. Nothing has changed in that respect.
No, the habituators never seem to come across with anything. And when I mean habituators, I mean these people that are seeing them on a daily basis, interacting with them. There's never anything substantial to back up their claims.
Well, and I have a story on that for you.
Oh, so, awesome.
I have had a couple witnesses that live in a remote part of Pennsylvania, and they're an older couple. She's a retired nurse. He's a retired school teacher, and he's blind, or he is very, 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 very poor sight. So they contacted me and my research partner to go out there and spend some time with them. She had had some experiences over several years that she couldn't explain. You know, at no point did she ever really directly say this is what she felt it was, or this is what it was. And after we met her, we went out there and spent some time with them, and I found them to both to be very credible people, right? What really got me on this was, you know, her husband's blind. He can't see anything. But the feelings he would get when something would show up around their property was really telling to me. And I feel that perhaps these people did have something going on over the years, and she eventually did have a sighting of something early in the morning. And I've lost contact with these folks, but, you know, they're two people that had nothing to gain, didn't make a dramatic appeal to TV channels or anything to get this story out there. They contacted somebody because I had done a presentation and somebody told them about us. I think it was their daughter. And they genuinely wanted us to come out there and help them with what was going on. And we couldn't answer that question for them. I felt they had something going on, and it's probably still ongoing. These people live in kind of a resort type area. They live out there all year round, and other folks, you know, come in over the nice weather and the holidays. And there's just something about the sincerity of them. And they never made claims. They just wanted us to find out what was going on out there. Unfortunately, we couldn't prove that to them. But they were so genuine. And that he couldn't see, he could feel, you know, that was really impactful to me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, that is... I'm just catching up with the chat room here. Sometimes I have to pop.
That's one of the
here.
That's one of the things that I judge about being a really a good experience and a credible one would be if somebody gets that feeling, some kind of weird feeling before they actually sight the creature. And because I've had different things happen to me and a lot of other guys around here and people that I've talked to have had weird things happen, and then all of a sudden they look and there it is. You know.
Well, the thing about her is that, Chris, she would have, like, she'd set something up in her windowsill one time, and I think it was something she had just baked and something took it, right?
I hate when that happens.
Her first response was, I think a bear got it or something. You know, it went right to some known animal. Like, no point was it Bigfoot stole my brownies. You know, it was, you know, something real took my stuff. And she had seen, you know, like I said, eventually she had a sighting of this large creature, and I have a picture of it on one of my websites somewhere. She was just they were so sincere. And those are the people that, you know, we should really focus and collect the stories from. Not these people where Bigfoot comes along, knocks on your back door asking for garlic, because, look, we know that doesn't happen. Right, I think people with brains that function in all areas know that this just doesn't happen. And if I sound rude to some people, I don't mean to sound rude about it. I mean, but come on, like there's common sense, right? Some of these people are just out there to tell a story, to sell it, and to get some attention. And there's people out there that may be really having these ongoing scenarios that are being either ignored or nobody wants to talk to them because of previous folks with, you know, outlandish claims and stories.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's the thing. You know, the honest witness looks for validation and looks for a little, you know, correlation to what they're seeing. You know, I had a case out in the Central Adirondacks a couple of years back. And good folks, good people, and we may not necessarily agree 100% on how they function necessarily, but that mattered not, because everybody's entitled to their opinion. But man, when we went up a couple times, we didn't really encounter anything. But their stories were real, and I don't think that it wasn't going on every day, but it was going on frequently enough for them to notice. And the one gentleman, Dave Gibson, he actually wrote a book about his experiences living up in the Central Adirondacks. I encouraged him to go ahead and put his feelings on paper and stuff like that. It's a very, let's face it, for people that see these things, I'm going to kind of transition into another part. It's very traumatic-like. It can be a trauma to folks. And, you have a sense of a belief system, and then all of a sudden, bang, there it is in front of you. Just phenomenal stuff. And for our listeners out there, I'm going to throw out the call out. I'm going to throw in the call-in line now. You can reach us and ask your questions live on air, or if you have a story, tell it. Our phone number here is 646-668-2982. That's 646-668-2982. And we're here on the line with Pennsylvania researcher Sean Forker, a vet. He's been around. And I remember Sean when he was just a lad. And man, it's been it's been really the last, like I said, I've been at this since 1998, so it's going on just about 20 years. It was a little latter part of 98 that I got reading, and 99 I really jumped in, but 98 is when my journey started, and it's been a real fun 20 years. And I got to say, Sean, I don't know when the heck we met, 2005, I think. It was right around the time you were doing stuff for Rob McConnell. Yeah. And you had basically kneecapped Biscardi's little tail trying to trip up Wayne Burton a little bit there. And
poor Wayne in Dallas, that he always used and abused, I felt. And those guys, Dallas isn't with us anymore. He was an amazing human being, and I ever felt anything he did was malicious. I don't like to put that out there, because I felt like he genuinely, believed what he believed, and he was always a decent person to me, even after, putting that information out there that they were kind of being, shown around and. Well,
I think what the initial reaction was, that's it. We know that Dallas and Wayne were doing this. But then we realized after they came out with a very real explanation, and if anybody wants to ever know anything about that whole scenario, not your typical Bigfoot movie. And you'll see
really good movie.
How sincere these guys were. They were in that Morgan Matthews documentary, Shooting Bigfoot. And, getting this show back up on the ground again took me down memory lane for a lot of different things. And I remember the Shooting Bigfoot show we did. It was one of our last shows we did on Blog Talk some years ago. And it was really an honor to have Dallas actually call in and talk about it. And because he was him and Wayne were the only researchers in that whole documentary that I trusted, that you could trust, because you couldn't trust, the guy from California, what's his name?
Joe, get me a Snapple.
I haven't heard that one in a while, gang.
And I'm happy about that. The less we hear from him, the better the world is.
Oh, God.
Kudos and salutations.
Oh, God. Sorry, I had to do that. But anyway, we didn't trust him. Obviously, that was, Dyer. We couldn't trust him. So, and Dyer's moved on to other things. He's got some pay here car lot in Florida now that he's running. He owns or whatever, and good for him. Good place for him. Good. God bless.
Yeah.
We hope everything works out for the well for him. Yeah, that's it. Every once in a while, he'll say something about the Bigfoot community, and good for him. we haven't seen much change except a lot of the hoaxers reinventing themselves. And really, it was an amazing time because we had seen this transition where we used to get a hoaxer and they used to disappear. There are several that just keep coming back and back and back and back and back. I don't know. The Bigfoot ballyhoo, they continue to keep on going on and on and on, and acting like they're not, they're being serious, but they're really not. And for me, I've always thought that was a problem. It's an image problem, not necessarily as dramatic as we like to think. But what happens is every once in a while, the mainstream media will aim their attention towards that kind of person. And that's what happens. I mean, I don't know, other than just being Canadian, why Les Stroud would have gone with Todd Standing. My opinion.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. But
I don't get it either.
But it is what it is. So we move forward. Not jealous about it. I've been on TV plenty of times. Not really worried about it. Here's what it is. He got his 15 minutes of fame. Now he's suing Canada again. And now he's trying to help Miss Ackley, which if he's, as far as things go, okay, maybe he is trying to have some kind of positive effect on the Bigfoot community, culture, whatever you want to call it. And, I'll say this much. That's more than the other guys are doing. The other guys are about
I like the...
You know what I mean?
I like the I like Les Stroud shows. I think he did a good job. It's a little misguided on his people he chose, but Les did some good shows. I think he could probably do some better ones if he would.
So okay, so he had Todd Standing on. At least he picked somebody that was knowledgeable. We're not.
The producers pick a lot of it too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. TV. They want people that are going to be interesting for TV. A guy like me's boring. I'm going to take you out to the woods, and you know what we're going to find? Nothing. Because you know what we usually find? Nothing. But you're going to get one of those mind-speaking Bigfoot whisperers out there.
Everywhere. Poop.
There it is.
Oh, man.
Oh, come on. What's your Squatchdetective Radio episode without a few laughs?
That guy, Steve, really has a soundboard loaded up here. He had, over the years, just the sheer amount of people that have been spoken to on this program has been incredible. You have the longest-running Bigfoot program on Blog Talk Radio. And how many years?
Came on September 24th, 2006.
Wow. 12 years ago. Can you believe that almost? Like, it's crazy. To think we've been talking about Bigfoot on here, and we've been doing it longer, but talking about it, these radio shows, there weren't as many once upon a time. There were a handful. I feel like we're having story time now.
Oh, that's fine. That's what the show's about.
There were a handful. You had, Squatchdetective Radio. I had the Sasquatch Experience with Henry May, and there was Bigfoot Quest with Bob Coyne and Mike Killen, and like these Sasquatch Watch, these were some really great shows. And the amount of people that we talked to over the years is crazy. But you know what's happened after we phased out a little bit and we all went doing other things? The crazy people ended up taking over somehow. They really have. Like, do you remember the people, even back when there were forums, ladies and gentlemen, the Bigfoot forums, for those of you that are listening, had a computer back then, there were some battles fought on that website.
Ooh.
Some battles.
Well, before that was the chat groups, the Yahoo chat groups.
We had too.
Where you would exchange insults via email.
Listen, kids, we would sit on the Yahoo Messenger, and Henry May would play a radio show through his speakers, and that's how we'd listen.
Oh, wait. Hang on.
Oh, no. What's that?
Sorry, I just spilled some ramen noodles on myself.
Nothing for you.
Oh, my God. Those days.
But, I mean, come on, this is a return of the show. We got to have a little nostalgia. Obviously, going forward, we're going to take some new tacks, but we had to throw some of these things out because over 12 years of doing this, we've talked to people like Dr. Henner Fehrenbach.
Yeah.
And he is long since retired. Statistician, did all this stat work, showed that reported tracks, the sightings, all came into a bell curve, which supported the fact that this was a living population rather than all over the place and nothing but, trickery. We've talked to John Green in the past. Of course, somebody who somebody had a long time ago that Sean never got along with. A lot of people didn't get along with. I've had my battles with him, but I managed to keep the personal stuff out of it. But Eric Beckshard, and I don't have it on the soundboard, but I remember the one comment he was talking about parallel universes, because this guy would get off on tangents. He was talking about parallel, and he goes, there may even be a parallel universe where Tom Biscardi is honest. So you know what? As much disdain as you may have about the guy's position, he was funny. He was great for a laugh. I mean, he would talk about Bigfoots and capes and cloaks. And I remember the one time he said, there was one report of a Bigfoot wearing human blue jeans, wearing like a tattered shirt on the side of a road. And I was like, Eric, that was no Bigfoot. That was a hippie hitchhiker. And he just kept on going without missing a beat. And I remember a caller came in and asked a question. He goes, did you ever talk to Bigfoot? And if so, what did he say? And I was like, I don't really want to ask this guy, Eric. You don't have to. And all of a sudden Eric goes, I can answer that. I nearly fell out of my chair. But
see, Eric Beckard would call you at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. If he liked you or didn't like you, and I guess if he didn't like you, he did like you, he would make your life a living hell. He was relentless, and he was mean sometimes, but he was funny. I mean, look, he and I had some nasty, and Steve, we had some nasty battles, but I always took it right back to him. In fact, I am still the only person to ever hang up. And nobody else could.
Well, I think it was about two years ago, I was looking online, and I actually found Eric's old blog was still available online, and I read through that thing, man, and I split my side laughing. Some of the stuff he was talking about that when he was on, quote unquote expedition with some lady. Man, if it's still online, you remember that one, Steve?
Yeah,
the lady started screaming or something.
Oh yeah, there was a big battle royal over that.
Or something, right? There's like a shovel involved.
Oh wow. But I can't remember, but I split my side laughing at that, though. It was hilarious. It may not have been to him at the time, but to me it was.
It was something else. And unfortunately, he passed away, 10 years ago already. Do you believe that?
I tried to eulogize him on one of the groups we belonged to back then to say something nice about my fallen enemy, and I got destroyed for saying something nice about this guy. And look, he was probably a miserable prig, you're right, but you know what? He was fun to spar with, and I don't know. You're supposed to say something nice about somebody regardless once they pass away. Even if you have something you don't like them, you still say something. I got ripped apart for being nice about him. I think Lauren Coleman even sent me a "What are you smoking?" email when I said.
Well, yeah, you know why? And you know what? It's kind of, and I would probably take it like this. There was probably some people that he really, really abused. I mean, we talk about, how would you feel if we said positive things about the Florida car salesman? how would that relate to somebody like a gentleman over in Australia that gentleman, that car salesman, made up a story that he was a sex offender and, inserted his name in a newspaper article and then sent it all around, circulated it around the internet.
Oh, and he did those things. Like that's not
right.
Let's be clear. That's not an exaggeration. That's the kind of stuff that Eric Becker did. It was really mean.
Right.
I'm laughing, but it was mean. Man. He was just awful. He was, but I enjoyed fighting with him, and I'm sure hell's a little warmer.
And never know.
It was nice. But you know what? Here's one to Eric Becker. So long.
Yeah, so long. He made life interesting. That's for sure.
He did. He really did.
And that's the way I look at a lot of the hoaxers. They make life interesting. I mean, people get sick and get angry, and I kind of take a look at it and go, you know what it is? It is what it is. What more can you say? But what we can say is, any new stuff in Pennsylvania?
There's all kinds of things going on down in the southern part of the state, Fayette County. Our good friend Eric Altman and Brian and Terry Seach and Fred Saluga. There's a whole group of folks investigating these sightings that are happening down in Fayette County. They call it Fayette Nam. You were down there for the Bigfoot Adventure Weekend.
Yep.
Camping weekend. I think I'm going to make an appearance at the next one.
Oh, God. It's a blast.
Crazy place.
I actually got a bear thermal. I got a thermal of a bear. It was me and Sean Dennis. Me and Sean Dennis were working the pipeline. And all of a sudden we heard something skulking about. I bring up my thermal and I see this thing standing there looking at us. And the screen is kind of small, so I couldn't make out. And off it went. Could put it back up on the big screen. It was a bear within 50 feet of us.
Well, and I remember getting text messages galore. Hey, Steve got something on the thermal.
Yep.
Because you had my colleagues Lon Strickler and Butch Wachowski down there too.
Yep.
You got to meet them finally, and
yep.
Everybody was really excited. The weekend was great, from what I understand. But that area has such a huge concentration of Bigfoot sightings. I don't know if it's the largest concentration in Pennsylvania. You still have Westmoreland County,
yep.
which is right on the Chestnut Ridge. That area, over the years, as most people know now from the movie Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. That area is really inundated with Bigfoot reports. Clearfield County, where I had my own experience with a couple of my friends and researchers, that area is just so rich with Bigfoot sightings and the historical Bigfoot sightings. It's just so weird. And, the one thing that really cemented some of this for me, Steve, was a few years ago, maybe 2011, 2012, in January, on New Year's Eve, and this one struck me because I thought maybe the folks were imbibing a little too much. I had two separate sets of witnesses see what I feel is the same creature that ran across the road. And the only reason I say that is because it had one striking identifying feature, and it was the white soles in the bottom of the feet.
Gotcha.
So
wow.
Those sets of witnesses had that same noticeable features, and they never met each other before. We brought them together just to see if they, you can't really lie about knowing somebody and meeting them for the first time unless you're going to win on for yourself. And they had no idea who the hell they were, and just bringing them all together was very interesting because it was Dave Rupert and myself, some of these folks listening, and I know you're probably familiar with Dave Rupert. We brought these folks together and kind of interviewed them en masse, and it was really interesting to see the similarities in what they saw. About an hour apart from each other, I really believe they saw the same creature. And
that's the kind of direct type of evidence that would win a lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, four separate people at different times seeing what I feel is the exact same thing.
And when we will at some point get Dave Drageson back on the radio show. He's been on the radio show. We were talking about guests over the years, and we've had tons. But Dave Drageson, drew. He's a sketch artist, and he did this has this creature that somebody saw that had like this cut lip or a cleft lip or something, and then years later, maybe 3-4 years later, this gentleman reported seeing one too, had the same identifying feature. And when Dave showed him, sketched his, he goes, wait a minute. And he was looking at the two, he goes, is this the same one? and it's just amazing, and it's that kind of thing. And then there's, of course, I talk about my own experience with the Ford Ann cast. I cast this one cast. It had to have been 2006. And I'm sorry, it was 2006. And then in 2009, a similar track was on. You could see the same callus on the foot, the same elongated toe, and it was the same heel length, heel toe length, and the toe splay was different. And a lot of people ask me, what does that have to do with it? Well, for those who don't know, toe splay should be different on different substrate because, on softer substrate, the sand and the dirt will get between the toes and push them further apart. So you should never, if you have something that's completely always consistently with the same toe splay, it's most likely a stamper. But this was different toe splay. So there's some scientific, physical evidence that can say, hey, look, here's these two identical tracks found 2.5 years, 3 years between them, about a mile apart, and look at the features on these. They're the same track. You just can't argue it. To me, that says more than any photograph or any single print. A lot of people talk about the Bosberg cripple print, and that was found by, I forget what year. I think it was 68. I think it was pre-Patterson-Gimlin. And a lot of people don't realize that was found by Ivan, although people say, yes, Bob Titmus was with him, but it was found by Ivan Marks.
Right.
And if you talk to Peter Byrne,
68.
68. I was right. But if you talk to Peter Byrne, he's under the belief that Bob Titmus was a hoaxer as well. But that's one of those things. Again, like we have today, back then we have a lot of animosity between research.
And I think it's probably. Sorry, Sean. Everybody and his brother has probably seen those Bosberg cripple print, the track. But we had on the show, Steve. Remember the photograph of the track before they cast it, and it did not look anything like the casting that was taken in the snow.
Right. No. And but Dr. Grover Krantz believed in its authenticity. So who knows? It's like one of those things. But I always Ivan Marks found it. That was before he, in '71, when he started coming up with the wacky quacky videos, and his little protege Mr. Biscardi came along with him. But Dr. Warren Cook, who is an anthropologist up here, he was a Pulitzer Prize nominee for literature. Did a lot to do with Vermont anthropology. A lot. He was in South America for a while, but he had a very strong interest in Sasquatch, and actually showed the Marks films at the college. And he said, although and this was his reckoning, is although it doesn't seem to conform what we should think a Sasquatch would look like, Peggy and Ivan were really nice to me, and they just seemed like down-home people that they just wouldn't do this sort of thing. So if you got to understand that mentality, then you have to understand the mentality of people like a Todd Standing or a Tom Biscardi or even a Rick Dyer. To some people, they are just the salt of the earth. And so be it. That happens. That's, unfortunately, people don't understand that in a con, the con is short for what?
Confidence.
You got it. And confidence is what they have to build into people to get them to believe it. Simple as that. Yeah. But once you turn on them, the venom strikes. And that's what you see time and time again.
It's always a sad thing, is that even if they had one really good piece of evidence, everything else they've ever done is forever marred.
I agree.
Objective. And it sucks because it could be the best piece of evidence of all time. And once you participate in some kind of event or action that really undermines your credibility, it just ruins it no matter how good it is.
Absolutely. And it's a shame because manufactured evidence is, there's no excuse for it. Just go out and do the work. There should be no shortcuts. And you got to understand that it's just such a complicated issue, this hoaxing. It has a lot to do. It's so multi-layered, and people don't understand that it's not as simple as it sounds. It's multi-layered because there's psychological issues at hand. There's maybe money motive issues at hand. I mean, there's so many different variables. There's a guy I know was hoaxing, and it was not because of anything malicious. In fact, I remember this guy telling me his first story, and I caught him in a couple of... So I said, all right, thank you, and I let him go. And I don't expose every hoaxer there is. I don't go out there and say, look, see what this person's doing, because to me it's counterproductive. And it also depends on motive. And this guy, if I look at his psychological profile, he was at the time he was in his late 40s. This goes back about 10 years ago. And he had just been divorced. And he sounded really lonely. And he sounded really despondent, living by himself. So I understand why, maybe. And we saw the same thing with the Mr. Mike saga. Remember that gentleman, the old guy Mike, who was taking care of his elderly sister? Chris, I know you remember this thing.
Yeah.
And he got on the Land Lampshire show, and he sent a couple of guys out that turned out to be the Facebook Find Bigfoot guys. And they even came back and said, he's in the middle of the city or middle of the town. There's no way. And when he was seeing things, they were looking out and they didn't say anything. It was just, these people shouldn't be put up to ridicule. In fact, I would never put a person like that on a radio show until, it's really, I mean, okay, you put them on a radio show, make them feel good. But, it's just such a sad, sad thing to see somebody that just needs a friend. And, but that's not the case with some of these other cats. And it's these other cats that I tend to point out to. Is the, maybe Squatch Dog, maybe he just needs a friend. Maybe, I mean, you look at the profile, and I have to sit there and think about this, about everybody. And it's kind of a humanistic approach, but it's also a very psychological approach, because once you understand their psychology, you can break them down very easily. And like the Squatch Dog, he's an older guy. Maybe he's just lonely. Maybe, I mean, is he doing it for money other than YouTube hits? Come on. Nobody's getting rich on YouTube unless you're getting 4 million hits a month. That video of the tree shaking, that one had me at first, guys. So much of me wanted that to be real, because I thought initially, holy crap, that's amazing. Like, that freaked me out. And then the more you look at it and break it down and start thinking objectively after the initial, I want this to be true, like, it was disappointing. But that one had me at first. And not all of it's, like, I don't know. Some of it's not easy to crack, but it had me. I was really intrigued by some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that can very well happen. That's why I always take stories at their face value, unless proven otherwise or one way or the other. All right, running a radio show is a very different type of animal than running an investigation. Right. A radio show, we're here to kind of facilitate people who want to share their encounters. And entertain. Right. And entertain. That aspect of it. Entertain, educate, entertain, and listen to the stories. And it's up to me on this show, it really is up to the audience to make that decision. Not to me. When we have guests on that have encounters, they're not what we're saying. We're not saying that they're true. We're just having them on to talk about it. Obviously, we will vet the best we can with some of the witnesses we've had. And over the years, we've put on very vetted witnesses, people like John, people like the gentleman you heard on the intro. You know, the three guys that all had the encounter, they've been vetted for years. And you know, there's been others that have been on that were kind of questionable. Remember Daisy in the Box? Remember that, Sean?
I'm jogging my memory. Refresh me here.
Ed Smith.
All right, you said Ed Smith. You had me at Ed Smith.
Yeah, he was on the show a couple of times and told some very grandiose tales and talked about what he felt these creatures were. But it was all a hoax. It was all a subterfuge. Yeah. And if that made him feel important for whatever reason, I'm happy for him. But the fact is that it was very untrue, and to me it was very angering at the time that this man had taken a couple of hours of my listeners' time. But the good news is that we always try to put out the best information, regardless of who the guest is. So we always try to put something out there that's, you know, educational, maybe something that, or at least some kind of thought that maybe somebody hadn't thought before.
No, and I applaud that because it's really hard to get to do programming, and if most of the listeners, you know, don't do a program of their own, but God, we've been doing this now since 2006, right? And I've been nonstop since 2006. I've not really braked for anything. I don't know how I haven't gone crazy yet because I talk about everything, Steve, from Bigfoot, UFOs, things that go bump in the night under people's beds. You know, I talk about it all. I don't do witnesses on air anymore. I let the researchers and people push in their products and their books and put them out there and get their point of views out. I think sometimes, and you know me personally, I have a tendency to be a little blunt, and I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and embarrass them, you know, in a public setting, because it could happen even accidentally, right? And you don't want to. And you talk about people with a fragile psyche, and some of those folks that, you know, may just want somebody to talk to. After a while, it's hard to. When you have people listening and people, you know, commentating that are listening to your program, to not want to satisfy that, you know, mass plummeting or pummeling to your witness.
Right.
And it's difficult. And that's why I kind of, you know, focus on the entertainment aspect of it more. I don't think everybody out there that is hoaxing, like you said, is doing it with malicious intent. There are people that are lonely, and there are those people, guys, that really believe what they saw, even if they didn't see it.
Yeah,
like they've convinced themselves that what they've seen, what happened.
Or their piece of evidence, the blob squatch. Now, I've always made this distinction. If somebody sees something and they take a picture of it and it turns out to be a blob squatch, to me that's important. That shouldn't be just, that's just a blob squatch. Hey, the person saw it. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of people taking out random pictures and making 5,000 circles on stuff and believing what they're seeing.
Well, you know, but Claudia Ackley, right, that we talked about at the beginning of the program, you know, she took that picture of whatever she saw, a Bigfoot, an 800-pound Neanderthal-type Bigfoot covered in hair 30 feet away. She snapped a picture of what she felt was a Bigfoot, right? At least that's my understanding of it. That's a lot different than going out taking pictures at your grandma's bay window, snapping photographs, and all of a sudden you've got aliens and cloaks in your garden and Bigfoot in the vegetables, you know. And that's happened to me. Like, I saw James Baker jump out of a moving vehicle to get away from this guy. And that's one of
Wow.
It happened. Like, this guy literally took a photo out his grandma's bay window and all started circling things that he saw out there, and it was pretty scary because he was convinced that, you know, this is what he saw, and there was nothing there but some tulips and some cantaloupe.
And you will never unconvince that person.
No. And that was the scary part about it. Like, this guy had, you know, resolved that this is what he see. You couldn't tell him any different.
Now, I'll relate another story to you, too. It has not only just transferred to what's on pictures, but sound as well.
Oh, and this gets hard.
Yeah, I remember being out in the woods, and this was in Kentucky, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Not you. You weren't there. This is at another location. And I'm standing next to this guy, and I hear, ooh, 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 ooh. That's a barred owl.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And all of a sudden he leans into me and he goes, "That's Bigfoot imitating an owl." And I just looked at him like he had 17 heads, and I walked away from him. I was like, that ain't no bed. That's an owl. That is a bona fide owl.
Let me throw you another one, Steve. I had recorded some sound clips in Keystone State Forest with one of my research partners at the time. It was some really interesting sounds. You might have heard them over the years. We called them the Keystone Monks. It was a really strange kind of moaning sound that I had never heard before. And I took it to Stan. That's what she said. And I took it to Stan.
Sorry.
No, I know. I took it to Stan Gordon, and Stan's listening to it, and he's like, "Wow, this is remarkable. I'd never heard this before." And this was great. We was getting ready to put it out. I sent it to some people to listen to what they had to say. I sent it to Stan Courtney, and Stan Courtney was like, "Well, this is interesting." And, we're getting ready to show this to more people. My research partner at the time, he goes, "I think I heard some EVPs in there." I'm like, "All right, well, Ernie, he's into all that stuff." And I'm like, well, what did it say? And he goes, "I think they were crash victims from 9/11. And right away, I'm like, well, we're done with this. This is never going to get heard, by any. I'm putting this away. It's not going anywhere, and it never went anywhere. As soon as these people start throwing stuff like that in there, I get nervous, and I'm like, nope. I don't even want an inkling of any kind of controversy with this. I'm not going to end up on hard copy or whatever the show. Hard copy is not around anymore. I'm not going to be on any of these programs. Just throw this stuff away. I don't want it. And that scares me. That really scares me.
No, and it does. It scares a lot of people. You wonder how much evidence is out there that's not been put forth because of that fright factor.
Yeah, you don't want to be made a mockery of either, right? Some of us are legitimate researchers. We don't see Bigfoot and porta potties and Sasquatch and vegetable gardens. Like, we're real investigators and researchers. I think we have to kind of, maybe split hairs between what a researcher and an investigator is. I think there's two very different skill sets involved in those, right? And I kind of investigate claims, and I go out and interview witnesses more than I go out and stake out a research area and kind of conduct experiments, right? I investigate claims. I don't go out and bait and do all that stuff. So I just go ahead. No,
I mean, some people say a researcher is a person who stays behind on the computer too.
Well, that could be, and they're important. Like, some of those people have been very helpful over the years. We have a friend, Steve, that if we needed information from October the 4th, 1972, I'd say, "Hey, Henry, I need this information. How quick can you get it to me?" "Well, I'll get it in a second,
Right. Sorry, I just spilled some ramen noodles on myself.
Nothing for you.
And I heard he hasn't recovered from that wound.
Well, I heard he switched from the chicken to the beef. But hello, Henry. We know at some point you will be listening to this podcast, so we just had a.
He's a good dude. He really is.
He is. He's awesome.
But he's a great guy.
And as soon as The Walking Dead's over with, we're going to have him on the show.
Oh, you can't, because nothing interrupts that Walking Dead. For the love of God, Henry, how long can you watch these people fly? These zombies should be dead by now, or at least not zombies anymore. Like, I don't know. I like the show. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's gone on too long.
Well, I don't know. Hey, well, what happened to Glenn? He's nothing but compost right now. So.
Oh, poor Glenn. You hear that?
Oh, that was the most graphic.
Yeah, you would think at some point that those corpses would decompose.
Yeah. There'd be nothing left. But that's TV, right? We need something to enjoy, to take away from real life, which is scary enough.
That's right. So, Sean, what has been your most interesting Sasquatch investigation you've ever been on?
Oh, my. Well, I can tell you it's the night I had my own experience. And guys, I was so taken aback by what I experienced that night, I almost quit altogether. I almost was done with Bigfoot research. On the way home that next morning, I stopped at a gas station, a Sheetz gas station, got a sandwich, and called my wife and said, I'm done. When I come home, this is going to be it for me. I'm finished. And I called Eric Altman, and Eric Altman was my mentor in this. He kind of fostered me and got me going in this field, and I always appreciate that. And I called him, and he thought I was finished too. Like, he'll tell you he never heard me so shaken up in my life, but it was in 2012. It was in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. And for folks listening, that's a very active part of Pennsylvania. We knew it was an active part of Pennsylvania. That's why we went there. Nothing usually ever happens to me, so I never thought I would ever have an experience of my own there. I've had a couple things strange happen in the past to me, but I never had an experience like this. And I didn't experience it by myself. I had two of my research partners and very good friends with me, and I'm really close to these guys. And my friend Dustin, who is now he was in the National Guard at the time, and he's no longer a member of the National Guard. He served his time, and he's out now in civilian life. And my buddy Ray Hendershot. And we had gone out with Eric Altman, Ryan Cavaline, David Rupert, and some other folks to investigate the area out in Clearfield County that has had some sightings. It was very close to that area I told you where those two groups of witnesses saw that creature, 6 months before that, earlier in the year, 7 months before that. And this area has always been very, very active. So we went out that night, and there's this meadow so what really should have been a red flag to us to begin with, because all things being as they are weird. We wanted to get a permit to camp, okay? So my buddy Dustin calls the park office to get a permit to camp here, and the lady goes, we don't know what you're talking about. They don't know this meadow area we're talking about where we want to camp, and it's been there forever. I've been there like a dozen times before that. It's clearly there. They have no idea what we're talking about. Which, should have, well, this is great. And so we drove in, and then we parked my van, and we walked in about 1.5 miles down the road and set up our campsite in this meadow, built a fire, and Eric and everybody, they went out to another location a little further down the road. We had got our fire going, and Dustin and Ray and I are sitting there by the fire waiting for the guys to come back, and I'm sitting there, and through the smoke, I thought I saw something run through the outskirt of our campsite. And I said, just kind of looked at Dustin. I saw Dustin looking off into the same area, and he looked at me, and he goes, did you see that? I'm like, what did you see? So as we're both talking, we hear something still going through the brush. So we both jumped up and ran to the edge where we could still see, and you could hear something taking off through the woods, moving at a very fast pace. And at that time, I got a glimpse of something that was, probably 6.5, 7 feet tall, covered in this tannish-colored hair, very lightly colored hair, and it moved so fast, guys. I've never seen anything move so fast in my life. It's not even hyperbole. That's just so gracefully and so quickly it moved. Yeah. When I was telling Eric what it looked like, I kind of likened it to a very large sloth and how it moved. It was just so flowing. You ever see a sloth move and how it's got the longer limbs?
Absolutely.
This is how this thing moved. And it kind of taken us aback a little bit. So we didn't think much of it. That was weird. We had a couple conversations about it and decided we were going to kind of hang on and do more research. Well, through the night we had heard some things around the perimeter of our campsite, but everything kind of settled down, and Eric and Dave and Ryan, they went and left for the evening. We were going to stay there, the three of us, by ourselves. Well, about midnight, we decided to pack it in. We put the fire out, took the logs off the fire like good campers, and we went to the tent and thought we'd retire for the night. We were going to get up earlier in the morning to start getting ready for the next day and, really start doing some serious Bigfoot activity. We just wanted to camp that night. Well, we're in there for about, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, and we hear something walking through our campsite. And we hear this sound. I'm like, is that a bear out there? I'm like, what the hell's going on? And it's clearly bipedal. You can hear it moving on 2 feet, right? And I'm lying there, and I see Dustin's cell phone light pop on. And Ray missed everything that night. I don't know how he missed 98% of what happened, but Ray just slept through most of this, okay? And Dustin's laying there, and he goes, "Let's walk it through our campsite." I'm like, "I don't know." So we're lying there, and all of a sudden, I start seeing glowing red down at the bottom of our tent. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So Dustin jumps up quick, throws his boots on, jumps out of the camp, and the fire's going again. Something had moved the logs and put them back on the fire.
Huh.
Well, at that point, I was freaked out, all right? And Dustin's like, Forker, throw me my pistol. So I throw my boots on, and I literally threw him his gun, which was pretty stupid, and jump out of the tent. And he goes over there, look. And as we looked, because the fire was going, and we could see that same lightly colored thing run up the hillside next to our tent. And I was freaked out. Ray figures out that something's going on. He wakes up and comes out there with us. And I'm freaked out. I decide I'm going to make a phone call. And there's not really good cell phone service. I had to run to the center of this little meadow, and like with 1.5, 2 bars of service, I tried to call Dave Rupert, couldn't get him. So I called and talked to his wife, Carrie. Right? And I'm freaking out, and this poor woman's on the phone listening to me, and she's like, I'll try to get a hold of Dave and see if we can get him back out there. She's like, if you guys don't want to stay out there, you know, you can come and you stay at our house. She was like really sympathetic and worried for me, and I got a hold of Eric, and he got a hold of Dave, and eventually, about an hour later, Dave and Ryan Cavaline hiked back into our area, and I think Ryan even has our reactions on film because he was making a movie at the time. You might have seen it called Mountain Devil.
Yep.
And he had our reactions on film. I don't know if he ever used it, but we were really shaken up. And they stayed with us for a while and couldn't have, you know, nothing went on. They got us to get back into the tent, and Dave's like, well, you know, if you can stay out here tonight, you know, maybe you can get something, you know, going again, or, you know, we can have some good stuff for tomorrow. We can start investigating. So they leave, and we go back into the tent, and we get settled, and wouldn't you know it, once again, here comes something running through our campsite. And I was done. We jumped out of the tent, and like that scene in Jaws, like where they're freaking out, and, you know, we stop. We see something swaying from behind a tree. All right? So Dustin had his gun pointed at it. And just in case it was a person, you know, I'm yelling these warnings. Look, guys, if you're out here messing with us, this isn't funny. Somebody can get hurt. Right. Like, we're not messing with you. You keep it up, somebody's going to end up getting shot. And we saw that thing sway from behind the tree, and Dustin raised his gun, and I'm like, you know what, just pull the trigger, shoot it now. And Dustin couldn't. He couldn't, you know, whether it was his training or whatever, he just wouldn't shoot something he didn't have a visual on, which I'm thankful for to this day, because we don't know what it was. But the fact that it came back scared the crap out of me, and that it kept coming back. So we went back into the tents. Nothing happened again for really the rest of the night. He did throw a glow stick out, and this was really weird. He threw a glow stick out into the woods, and as we're waiting there a little bit, all of a sudden you see the glow stick pick up, and it moves, and then it just drops.
Wow.
And at that point, I'm like, as soon as it gets daylight, my fat ass is out of here. We're done. So we're laying there. It starts raining a little bit.
If things couldn't get any worse.
Nothing happens for the rest of the night, but we're lying there, and there's this really brilliant flash of light at one point. And I'm like, well, hey, you know what's a great thing? Because maybe Dave and them got something on a game camera. They put a game camera up, and maybe it took a picture of something, right? Well, morning broke, and it was about probably 5:30, 6 o'clock. You started getting some light. We fooled everything. We pulled it, threw it into a tote that we brought the firewood in, and we ran. I made it out of there in less than 6 minutes, and I'm a little husky guy. We made it out of there quick. I was on the road, and I never wanted to go back. And I had talked to Dave later on that day or the day after, and I said, did you ever get anything on the camera? And he goes, what are you talking about? So I started telling Dave about, you know, the flash of light I saw, and he goes, Sean, none of our game cameras had flashes on them. So we don't know what that flash of light was. It scared the hell out of us. It wasn't lightning. I mean, it could have been. I don't know. But it's that experience scared the hell out of me. We had a visual sighting of something. We had an ongoing series of something visiting our campsite. I don't know what it was, but it scared me, guys. And I was done. Like, after that, it may not sound as scary now because I've told it now about a dozen times. But in that moment when it happened, I was freaked out beyond belief.
Well, you know, it's
after. I just wanted to ask Sean that after you had your encounter there, did that change the way you looked at being like an outdoorsman? I mean, did you do things differently after that?
Well, I never really fashioned myself an outdoorsman to begin with, so I don't think it hurt that much of me. But I won't go in the woods alone by myself anymore for anything.
It changed your outlook.
It did. It really did. It's a safety thing for me now. Like, it really scared. It was really horrible because I kind of felt exposed and vulnerable in a way I'd never felt before. Like, we feel pretty safe as, having weapons and everything with us, but there's something about that moment where you doubt if that weapon will actually even do anything. And I'm not a macho guy to begin with. Like, first of all, if that thing wanted me, it could have killed me and ripped me into a million pieces, and it would have had lunch for a long time. But it scared me, and I hadn't felt that way before. Like, I'd never felt fear where I felt I was in mortal danger. And I don't think if this one of these things wants to kill you, I think by all means it's going to kill you. I don't want anybody to go out there being Rambo trying to mow one down because it scared them. But if it wanted to, it could probably have no problem taking somebody apart. And there's nothing you're going to do to stop it. I don't think. And that revelation for a while, Chris, really shook me and stuck with me and damaged my psyche a little bit. And finally you get over it. But I'll tell you what, it did make me a lot more understanding and sympathetic to witnesses, but it also really strengthened my bullshit meter, if that makes any sense. Like, when you sit with somebody else that had an experience and they're scared, I don't know if it's some sort of just emotional response or something you have to, but you can tell and you can feel it, and you know what these folks are talking about.
Yep. And if anything, it probably fortified your belief in that they exist.
Yeah, it did. It strengthened that. Like, there's something about experiencing something and it making you a believer, but I don't know if it's actually made me a believer. I think there's still that part of me that we don't know what I saw. I don't know what I saw. Dustin doesn't know what he saw. Ray doesn't know what we experienced. That kind of leaves the question of, what was it? And I think if anything, it's really made me more objective and more focused on finding out. I'm not looking for just the everyday run-of-the-mill excuses to what this is. I want to know now more than ever what I experienced, and it's really increased my awareness.
Well, a couple of big observations. The first thing is the description of it being sloth-like. A lot of them, especially in the Northeast, seem to be long and lanky, not very robust like the ones are seen in the Pacific Northwest. Whereas the skunk apes, the ones in the South, are a little shorter. The ones in Northeast are taller, but they're really, slim. And if you think about it, the Brazilian version of a Sasquatch is called the Manganperry, and literally it means sloth man or sloth-like.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yep. So, it all fits. And if you look at some of Dave Dragg's pictures, I mean, you can see almost a resemblance in the face of it looking kind of sloth-like itself. Or its posture is very sloth-like. The other interesting thing I find is the whole firewood story. And at some point, we're going to get Shadow back on, and we'll tell a little story about what happened to us in the Adirondacks when he was up here almost 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, when we had a little outing over the course of 5 days, and it's when we did the Monsters and Mysteries Unsolved, which was also Paranatural on Nat Geo, which aired in the Asias and Australia, and it aired in Destination America as Monsters and Mysteries Unsolved. There was a lot of stuff that went on after the crews left, and what you said about them coming and going, and especially after you going into your tent and quieting down for a little while, all of that is stuff that I personally have experienced. They like messing with you, and it's not they're not trying to scare you. It's their way of having fun, I believe. And it does really shake you, because every time, I think like 2 out of the 3 nights, maybe 3 out of the 4 nights, we went in to sleep, something happened. Whether it be something moving some stuff, whether it be something slamming the hood of a car, or whether it be me actually seeing something. And all of those things happened in that. So when we get Shadow on, and I'll probably get him on maybe next month, or at least see if he can spend a little time with us. And, we'll talk about that. But, good God.
Primates are curious by nature, Steve. So, if you're out there and, they got to be bored to death year-round, and if you're out there providing a little entertainment, I think they're going to make the best of it.
We are their TV. Well,
right.
Believe it or not, we are at 4 minutes left to the show.
4 minutes?
Yeah, a 90-minute show goes by fast.
Wow. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Oh, my pleasure. Any parting thoughts before we kick it off?
No, just continue the good work, Steve. I enjoy listening, and I wish you and Chris the best. If folks are so inclined, they can go and listen to me every Friday night at 11 p.m. on radio-memphis.com on The Existence of Strange Things. That's the show I host now. It's a 3-hour show, so pack yourself a lunch. It's long-form interviews, but we had some great guests on there. We just spoke to some folks from the UK talking about the British Bigfoot, and that's in its own kind of controversy right now, which is really cool. And I'm having a lot of fun still doing this. I still actively investigate. You can go to my website, theforkchop.net, and drop me a line if you want me to investigate anything. I try to be active, and I love what we do. This is great stuff. It's great mysteries, and I think as long as we still have fun doing it, that's what's most important.
Amen to that. And, Sean, you're welcome here anytime. I'm sure at some point there's going to be a round table over something, and I'll make sure you're on it because you're always fun to have on.
Well, I try. Thank you.
And so, folks, next week we have actually one of my Monster Quest alumni from Bigfoot in New York. We're going to have from Massachusetts and the group Squatchdetective. We're going to have Dave McCullough on, and Dave will be talking about all his fun exploits there in Massachusetts. Of course, we love for you to visit us at Squatchdetective.com or Squatchdetectraveradio.com or the Squatch Detectives blog, which you can get through. It's a lot easier just to go through the website and visit some of my rants and ravings and information. Chris, you got any parting words for our wonderful audience tonight?
Oh, just glad to see everybody again. Thank you for joining us. And, Sean, it was great seeing you and talking with you again.
You too.
And as always, thank you, my brother. And, Chris, it's so fun to be on the pilot and co-pilot seat. The plane is flying again. So on behalf of everybody here at Squatch Detective Radio, we want to wish everybody a safe, healthy, and happy week. God bless, and of course, keep on squatching. And we'll see you all next week, 9 p.m. Eastern here on BlogTalkRadio /Squatch Detective. We'll all catch you next week.
Thank you for listening to Squatch Detective Radio. Join us each week on Blog Talk Radio, Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern, as your hosts, veteran Bigfoot researchers, Steve Culls and Chris Bennett, bring you guests from around North America, exploring the mystery of the beast known as Bigfoot.